Chapter 4. Johann shares his secret. Johann told Dritzhahn and Heilmann about his plans. He was going to invent a way to make more copies of one manuscript in just a few days than all the scribes in Mainz, or in all of Europe, could make during the rest of their lives. When he did, he would earn a fortune. Anyone who invested money in his project would earn a fortune also. Right now, he told them, he needed money for materials. He thought he needed a year or two to work out a few minor problems. Once these were solved, books could be made by metal letters and a press rather than by hand. His partners were eager to learn about the invention and share in the fortune to be made. Dritzhahn and Heilmann agreed to invest 250 guildens more for a total of 410 guildens. Johann asked them to pay 50 guildens in cash and the rest in payments over the next 2 years. He also made them promise to keep everything a secret. Johann drew up an agreement. It stated that if any partner should die before the contract ended in 1443, no new partners could join. Unlike Heilmann, whose brother paid the 50 guildens for him, Dritzhahn could only come up with 40. To get that much, he had taken out a loan on the property he inherited from his father, and he asked the farmer renting his land to sell off some of the grain. But that brought in only a small amount. Dritzhahn was such a good craftsman that Johann was willing to wait for the remaining 10 guildens. Dritzhahn was sure Johann's invention would be making money before the next payment was due, and he would no longer be in debt. Johann showed his partners the basic goldsmithing techniques of melting metals. The partners would not be sand-casting letters as Johann had done before. They would be using 3 tools that Johann had perfected over the years: the punch, the matrix, and the mold. Punch, mold, matrix, type. To make a punch, he cut a letter into the narrow, pointed end of a steel bar. He scraped and fouled the letter again and again until it was perfectly shaped. Johann's punches were similar to those used by bookbinders. Except when Johann wanted to check his design, he didn't pound the punch into a leather book cover. Instead, he held the punch over a flame until it was covered with soot. Then he pressed the sooty punch against a piece of paper and looked at the printed letter for any flaws. For the matrix, he heated a bar of copper or brass. Here, his skill in working with metal came in handy. With a hammer, Johann carefully pounded the punch into the bar. When he removed the punch, the shape of the letter remained stamped into the bar. This bar became a model or matrix of the letter. Then Johann stuck the matrix into the bottom of a small wooden frame. This was his mold. He poured hot liquid metal onto the mold. He jerked hard, so the metal filled all corners of the mold and matrix. When the metal cooled and hardened, Johann removed it from the mold. The hardened metal, called a piece of type, was a stick only a few inches long. On one end was a raised letter. Johann's idea was to stand the metal sticks, letter end facing up, in a press. He would make words, sentences, paragraphs, whole pages of little metal letters. But first he needed to make more type. Dritzhahn and Heilmann used punch, matrix, and mold to make type for all the letters of the alphabet. Johann showed them how to adjust the mold for skinny letters like I and L and for fat ones like M and W. He had discovered earlier that when he didn't adjust for width, the letters would print like this. Dritzhahn and Heilmann made many pieces of type since Johann used the same letter a number of times when he set up a page. He was still having problems keeping the type from slipping and printing crookedly. He needed to find a way to line up the letters and keep them even while he printed them. Johann asked Conrad Sasbach, a special kind of carpenter called a joiner, to make a better frame to hold the type in place. He also asked him to make a printing press. The most important part of the press was a large wooden screw attached to a long handle. Only a joiner would have the skill to carve such a screw. The press was set up at Dritzhahn's house in town. No outsider could see the entire printing press in one place. That way the secret would be safe. Dritzhahn spent his days at St. Arbogast with Johann. At night he carried on experiments in his home, trying out type on the press. Barbara de Zabern, his neighbor, often saw Dritzhahn working late at night. One time she came over. "Don't you want to go to bed at all today?" she asked. "I must do this first." Dritzhahn continued busily arranging the press. Barbara asked him what he was doing. He told her he was making mirrors for the Aachen Fair. That was the answer the partners had decided to give anyone who became curious about their secret work. Barbara continued to talk to Dritzhahn. "But goodness, what a sum of money you seem to be spending. Why, all those things must have cost at least 10 guildens." Dritzhahn, worn out with working so much, shouted, "You are a simpleton. Listen. If you had all it has cost me over 300 guildens, you would have enough to last you all your life. I have sunk both my cash and my inheritance into the matter." "But if it should turn out badly, what would you do then?" she asked. "It can't turn out badly," he replied. "Before a year is over, we shall have back again all our money and be well off forever." Overwork ruined Dritzaean's health. Shortly before Christmas, he became ill. Johann sent his servant to Dritzaean's house to bring back the type. In December of 1438, Andreas Dritzaean died, penniless. After Dritzaean's death, Johann did something that is hard to believe. He melted down all the metal type they had spent so much time making. Since the type had been in Dritzaean's house, his relatives might claim it as part of their inheritance. Johann didn't want to risk that. He would rather start over again than have anyone else learn his secret. When Hielman heard about Dritzaean's death, he ran to Conrad Saspach's house. "Conrad," he said, "since Dritzaean is dead, and as you made the presses and are in on the secret, go and take the press at Dritzaean's to pieces so that no one can tell what it is." When Saspach arrived, the press was already in pieces. Johann probably got there first. Andreas Dritzaean's older brother, George, demanded that he and his brother Nicholas take Andreas's place in the partnership. George was a minor Strasbourg official known for his bad temper. When Johann told him there could be no new partners, George decided to take Johann to court. George wanted all the money Andreas had invested. Johann's contract with his partners protected him from these kinds of claims. The contract set a very low limit on what Andreas's heirs could expect to receive, but Andreas had been absent-minded. Although he had the contract with him when he died, he had never bothered to sign it. In 1439, Johann found himself in court again. He worried that the secret of his printing experiments would come out during the trial, but his partners refused to talk about their work. Johann pleaded with the judge to rule against George and Nicholas Dritzaean. The lawsuit lasted a year. Johann's experiments were at a standstill until the court finally ruled in his favor. After the trial, he went back to his workshop, but most of the partnership money had been spent, and Johann's remaining partners wouldn't contribute any more guildens. Johann took a loan from a Strasbourg church, but after that money was gone, no one else would lend him any more. He seemed further from making a success of his ideas than when he first talked to his partners about making books from metal letters. Johann Gutenberg decided to go back to Mainz and collect his inheritance.